Coming up on today's show.
It's the type of thing that you need to think about, you need to make those decisions, but it's so easy to just let the busyness of life take over and not really take the time to do that.
So what kind of questions do you ask yourself, or should you consider when you're trying to decide on priorities even?
One of the hardest decisions that we make is about an event that's far into the future. And we're more likely to say yes to that because we look at our calendar a few months from now and we say, oh yeah, I've got plenty of time to prepare for that.
Learning to say no, today on Keeping You Organized. Hello, welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today, we don't want you to say no to this show, but we do want you to learn to say no to a lot of things that get in the way of life and time management, your calendar, even the stuff that you bring into your house. So we're going to bring on Angie Heitch from ShipShape.Solutions. Angie, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Thank you.
Great. Well, this concept of learning to say no, this comes up a lot, especially when we talk about time management and getting organized in general, and where everyone's got too much going on in their lives, and you just got to learn to say no. So I think this is going to be a great episode here where we learn how to do it. So maybe we should start out kind of broad and work our way maybe into specific tips. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay, so where do you want to start with this learning to say no?
Well, I want to start with just how broad of a problem this is and how it contributes to our clutter. And I'm talking about clutter in a very broad sense, not just our physical stuff in our homes, although that's definitely part of it, but our calendar can get very, very cluttered. And one of the biggest reasons we find ourselves in this cluttered mess is because we haven't learned to say no. We've brought so many events into our schedule, items into our home, because we just can't say no. And I think the most broad principle in all of this is that in order to make the best decisions about either physical items or events on our calendar, we really have to keep in mind our priorities. What's important to us? What do we want our legacy to be? What are we passionate about? If we don't know those things, then we can't make good decisions.
Right. It's interesting. Just this fall here, I have a daughter who's involved in both violin and a theater play, a musical. Mm-hmm. And we had to actually, she wanted to do both, but they kind of, for about 5 or 6 weekends, they both had rehearsals at the same time in different parts of the city. And we said, okay, we have to say no to one. So we decided on, we're going to be doing the musical, but we can't start the orchestra part of the practice until, for the violin, until after the show is done for the musical. So, literally, that's one where we had to come up with a priority, and they're both important, right? They're both important to each other, but we had to say no. And so that's a fresh example in our life.
Yes, and that is such a big life lesson. Your daughter learning these principles early is wonderful. Right. So good job on teaching that and putting it into practice in a very practical way.
Well, it wasn't without a little wrestling and a little conversations. And, typically we like to say, hey, let's just do one thing at a time, not like 2 or 3, but,
right. And sometimes that's possible and sometimes it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all going to work out.
Yeah. And those setting the priorities and that kind of thinking, it takes a lot of contemplation, a lot of deep reflection and time. And it's the type of thing that you need to think about, you need to make those decisions, but it's so easy to just let the busyness of life take over and not really take the time to do that. I have found that in my own life, part of the reason I stay so busy is because I'm avoiding those questions. I'm avoiding that deep reflection. So I just go. And then all of a sudden I realize, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed and I'm not good for myself or my family or my friends or my business. And So it's really about being proactive about your life when it comes to the time management part. But the same principles apply when we're talking about stuff.
So what kind of questions do you ask yourself, or should you consider when you're trying to decide on priorities even? I mean, what are some of those things?
Yeah. What is important to me? What do I care the most about? What do I want to teach if you're a parent? What do I want to teach my children? What kind of legacy do I want to leave? What do I want to be remembered for? What when you really think about what's important in my life, what would I put up there? And if you make all the decisions based on those, it really can drive every decision. Now, sometimes the little daily things of life don't necessarily apply. I mean, although, I guess you could think about it in a broader sense. I mean, I can't say, well, my family's most important, therefore I'm never going to, well, I guess cleaning the house would relate to having a peaceful family life, but
Right.
but it's those kinds of questions that you ask and for your business, think about, what is my business about? What does my company want to project to the world? What do I want to offer to people?
Right. And don't you think it's important to get others maybe involved in that conversation? Like with our daughter, we sat down and said, look at the calendar here. I mean, now what we could do is we could skip 1 week of musical and go to 1 week of violin orchestra, and then the next week go back. But then you're going to be doing both of them not quite that great. So why don't we just wait on the orchestra, get the musical done, and then you can go full bore the rest of the year into the orchestra. And I think, having that input instead of just dictating this is the way it's going to be,
Right.
Having people involved in the decision is great too.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
Good. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk maybe a little more specific about like your calendar, because oftentimes that's kind of like the place we put our decisions into effect, because then we start committing ourselves to certain things. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We're with Angie Heitch from ShipShape.Solutions talking about learning to say no, and we'll be right back. New solutions for your desktop from MyOrganize.life. Fall is a time for a change in colors, and now you can brighten up your desktop with organizing products from MyOrganize.life. Colorful, fresh, invigorating. Give your desktop a new look with new desktop solutions from MyOrganize.life. That's MyOrganize.life. MyOrganize.life. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about learning to say no. And before the break, we were discussing this concept of priorities. When we want to say no, we need to kind of consider what our priorities are. And we have Angie Heitch from ShipShape.Solutions. And Angie, so, we've made some of those decisions based on priorities. Let's kind of drill down a little bit and look at, dealing with our time and a calendar and, commitments, right? It kind of all works together, because a lot of times people don't want to, someone will say, hey, can you do this? And you want to do it and you don't think, and you schedule that time, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I had something else on my calendar there. So
Right.
How do we attack that?
Okay. So, there are limits to just thinking about priorities and doing the important things. I mean, there's certain things we have to do. Somebody's got to wash the dishes and do the laundry, scrub the toilet. If it's part of our job description, we can't say, no, I don't want to do that because I'm not passionate about it. So what we're talking about is for optional activities. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of resources that I found lately that were really helpful with this. One in particular, there's an author, is a time management expert named Laura Vanderkam. She's written several time management books. What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast is one of them. I watched an interview between her and writer and life coach Marie Forleo. And she said one of the hardest decisions that we make is about an event that's far into the future. And we're more likely to say yes to that because we look at our calendar a few months from now and we say, oh, yeah, I've got plenty of time to prepare for that. And sure, that's no problem. And it's like we think our future self is not going to have a busy calendar.
Right.
And so when that time comes, of course, we've got all these other things that have crept up. And all of a sudden we just go, oh my gosh, why in the world did I say yes to that?
Right.
It's because we thought we had endless amounts of time.
Yeah. I think sales managers use that technique a lot too in teaching their salespeople that when you try to make an appointment with someone, yeah, you can say, well, next Thursday or next Friday work, but you'd be surprised. You do 3 or 4 weeks ahead. And like you say, most people, even if they're very organized, they're planning a week at a time maybe, and but their schedule looks a lot more open. But boy, if you got to the week of that week, it would be a lot fuller. So,
definitely. And she had really good advice for this. She said, so if someone asks you something and it's far in the future, what you need to do is think about it as if it was tomorrow. So if I look at my schedule and tomorrow I'm probably going to have commitments, but if my attitude about it is like, okay, I've got this going tomorrow, but oh man, this is such a great opportunity. All right, let me see if I can shift things around. I'm so excited about this. I've got to figure out a way to make it work. If you don't feel that way about it now, you're not going to feel that way about it months in advance. So if you're not really passionate and excited about doing it now, just go ahead and say no, because you're going to feel the same way when that time comes.
Right. And that kind of gets back to the priorities thing too.
Yes.
It may sound good, but is it going to fit within the priorities you set either for your life or for your business? So
definitely.
What are some other calendar-oriented tips that we can use for learning to say no?
Well, I think it's a good idea to have your excuses ready. And you don't have to be real specific. You don't have to say, well, on that day I have so-and-so activity planned. But I think it's good to just be in general, always say, thank you so much for the invitation. You can say, I'm really trying to focus on whatever. I'm committed to so-and-so activity. And just get comfortable saying those words. If you need to practice in front of a mirror, in front of someone, people say no all the time. We tend to feel so guilty, and we want to help people so much sometimes that we say yes, we really didn't want to, right, but we just can't say those words. So just get comfortable with the words. And remember, the thing that you're saying, every time you say yes to stuff, you're saying no to something else. So you want to leave some space in your calendar for the things that you're super excited about doing. And if you keep saying yes to marginal things, you have no space there.
Right. This is an interesting technique that I've heard before from other time management people, where you maybe have some times during your week where you have certain themes. So maybe, Thursday afternoon from 1 to 4 is when you can meet salespeople, or when you want to make sales calls, let's say. And so if someone does 3 or 4 weeks ahead, say, hey, are you available? How about the week of the 26th of November or whatever? You can say, oh, Thursday afternoon, I have some time from 1 to 2. And what I've also found out in dealing with really busy people and people that are good at time management, it's almost impossible to get appointments with them because they're so controlling and so in control, I guess, of their schedule that you have to fit within their little block if you're going to be successful in getting on their calendar.
Definitely, because they hold to it.
Yeah.
Yes. And these principles are great for time management, but they're also good for as far as when people are trying to give us things that we really don't want, and we bring them into our home, and then we've got a lot of clutter. We can use these same principles. If someone offers us something, well, first of all, it's not always possible to refuse it. If it's a gift,
right,
if it's a deceased loved one's possessions and it's put in our care, we may not be able to refuse it initially, but once we have it, it is completely our decision as to what to do with it. And guilt is not a good enough reason to keep something.
Yeah, I've used this story before on some of our other shows, but we have a particular relative who likes to gift us things like expired food and things that should have been thrown away, but we've just learned to say, oh, thank you, that's so nice, and then after they leave, we just throw it away, but
yeah, sometimes that's the easiest.
Right. Yeah, how else can you so I like this this concept of having some what I would call canned responses or our answers for people, so that you can at least you're saying no, but you're saying it in maybe a gentler way, or you're
Right.
kind of leaving an open-ended option. Is there anything else with clutter or things around your home as far as saying no and how that's going to help you stay decluttered?
Yeah. So if someone offers you something, think really hard about, do I need it? Do I want it? Do I love it? And those are good questions to ask when you're thinking about the stuff you already own. But you might think to yourself, okay, if I saw this at the store, would I buy this for
Right.
whatever price? If it's not something that you would buy at the store, then you don't need that in your home. And again, it's good to have those excuses at the ready. Always start with, thank you so much for thinking of me. But and you can say, I'm really working on being more mindful of what I have, on
Hmm.
decluttering my home, or I have limited storage space. I tell my clients all the time, you can blame it on me. People try to offer you something and say, well, I'm working with an organizer and she's really helping me think about what I have and whether this is in line with what I want in my home and priorities, and just have those ready. Get comfortable with saying that.
Mm.
um, and think about, put yourself in the opposite scenario. Let's say I had something, I really thought this person would be able to use it and would enjoy it, and I was offering it to them. If I thought they didn't really want it, I wouldn't want them to take it.
Right.
I would not want them to feel guilty. So
Yes.
it's okay to say no. I mean, people are not trying to force things on you out of guilt. They legitimately think you might want it. But if you don't, I mean, just go ahead and say no. It's
Yeah.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
giving you permission right here.
Good, thank you. So if you didn't see that, we'll put it in the notes of the show that Angie gives you full permission to say no and blame it on her.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I think
So
guilt.
all across the country, people are going to be saying, "Well, that Angie Height
Yeah.
of Ship Shape Solutions said it was okay to say no."
Yeah. So yeah, that guilt is one of those things too, especially if it's someone
Yes.
who's close to you or whatever. And like I said, with the expired food, you don't want them to feel bad because they really also want to give it as a gift too. But so yeah, I think those are things that we have kind of built into us, but we can say no. We just have to say no to it and say it in maybe a gentler way, right?
Right. And if you know of a good destination for something, someone's trying to give you something and you don't really want it, but you say, "Oh, but I know that the Boys and Girls Club down the street, they love doing those kind of crafts. And so that would be a great thing to give if you want to
Right.
help them find a better home for it."
Great.
But yeah, just don't bring it in the first place.
Yeah.
Most of us are blessed in this country to have all that we need, and usually a whole lot more than that.
Right.
And so if we don't just stop the floodgates of things coming in, items and events on our calendar, then we're never going to learn how to do this right, and save our time and save our spaces to use them how we want to make our life what we want it to be. I love the broad definition of clutter that Peter Walsh says: anything that gets in the way of living the life you want to be living.
Right. That's an excellent quote. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, Angie, we don't want people to say we're just going to all blame it on you. And actually, we'd like to maybe have them work with you so they can legitimately say that. So instead of saying no to Angie, how can somebody get a hold of you, and what kind of services do you provide that people can say yes to?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website at shipshape.solutions. I do residential and business organizing, any area of your home or your business. I do some volunteer organizing for nonprofits. I feel very passionate about working with nonprofits. I love to do organizing presentations for groups. So drop me a line, Angie at ShipShape Solutions, or check out my website, and I'd love to work with any of you.
Awesome. Well, this is great, Angie. I really appreciate you being on today. And we're going to get people to say yes to this episode, and we'll have you back again. Would you say yes to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, folks, there you have it. I think you've learned how to say no now. Put it into effect for your time, put it into effect for your clutter and your stuff, and then come back next time for keeping you organized.